So, you probably can't see very well. Oh god, it's so bright. So, my name is Liz, and I have PTSD. I've been thinking about doing this video for a while since I saw the PTSD challenge. I can't be too loud because, of course, this doesn't ever happen in a time when it's appropriate or okay, and my story is a long one, but I just came out of a panic attack and anxiety attack and flashbacks, and it sucks. I am emotionally drained, physically drained, tired, frustrated, terrified to go to sleep, been crying, and my husband's asleep behind me. So basically, I have to try to stay quiet because right now we are out of town in a state that I've never been to. We're in Kansas. My husband's grandfather died, which he didn't really know that well. It's actually his stepdad's father. So we're here for the funeral and all of that, which of course couldn't happen at a worse time when we are staying in a house with people that I don't know, and flew all day on flights and anxiety and cramped spaces and long days, and I didn't get any sleep last night because of physical issues that I was having and anxiety that I was having because of a lot of stuff that's been happening over the past couple days. I can't turn the light on in the room because my husband's sleeping. I asked him for help and cried for about an hour. Took a couple of Xanax and couldn't breathe. I was having really bad anxiety, thought they would help, and they didn't. So about an hour later, when I was still crying, I tried to take another because I know I'm now running on no sleep. I already don't really get along well with his family that we came here with his mom and dad. So that's hard. I don't even really know where to start because my story is so long, so I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but I just really needed to get this out, and I made a couple posts about it. Both times, unfortunately, nobody commented on it. They were both really late at night, and I don't know if maybe people just weren't awake, or if somehow I did something wrong, they didn't see my post. I've been a member of the group for, I don't know, several months, and just started to write my story out so many times, but there's so much, and it's just, had a lot of anxiety about posting it because I had to be quiet about it for so long, and it's hard. You're scared. You don't, even though it's a private group, you don't want people to see it. What if my mom's family saw it or something, and I shouldn't care, but I do, and I just needed somebody to talk to, and I don't have anybody. My husband's usually very supportive, and he tries really hard, but it's not his fault. He can't always understand, and obviously right now it happening here when we're with his family out of town at a funeral, worst timing ever, and I can't sleep, and I can't take any more medicine because I've already taken all I could take, and it didn't work, of course. So I'll probably be up for a while tonight, and then funeral all day tomorrow, and it's just hard. But I guess I'll start with where my story started, I guess. So basically, and I apologize because I've been told before that when I talk about my story, sometimes it sounds like I'm talking about someone else's, because I sort of am numb to it sometimes. Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate that. And I will definitely probably take you up on that, and feel free to message me too. Anybody who wants to. I just hope maybe this video will help somebody else. And like I said, I need to start somewhere and get some of it out. But when I was a kid, I was adopted, and not to say that I didn't go to a good family, because I did, and I'm very blessed, but things were not perfect. My family was not prepared emotionally for adopting a child and what all that entailed. My mom was very, very jealous, overly jealous, made a lot of really bad choices when it came to my health and my life, because she was so terrified that I would just up and leave one day and go to my birth family. And from the time I was little, I don't even remember when they told me that I was adopted. I've known my whole life, and I always wanted to find them, and wanted to find someone that was like me, because my mom's family, not her whole family, but the family that lived in town, her sister and her sister's husband and their 4 kids. I was an only child, and so all I had was my cousins and them, and I had wonderful grandparents that lived one house down, but my grandmother now is going through Alzheimer's, and it's really hard. But anyway, her family, her sister, and her sister's husband and her 4 kids were always really mean to me, because I was adopted. I was different. I didn't look like them. I didn't act like them. And my mom had a lot of resentment that I wanted to find my birth family. And they were just really cruel. They hid a lot of stuff from me. There was a lot of secrets. There was a lot of lies. Everybody in my life knew more about my life than I did. And I got sent to work for my aunt and uncle at their family barbecue business when I was 13 years old. I started busting tables and working here and there, which I was a kid, and I was pretty sheltered. I didn't know then what I was getting into, and that I wouldn't be able to get out of it 4 years and years later. So I took the job, and as a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever that I had a job my friends didn't. I had extra money. It was cool. I didn't work all the time at 13, obviously, but I started there. And I kept the job. That was my first and only job until I was 21. So from the time I was 13 until I was 21 or 22, my cousin's husband, who was one of the part owners and full-time bosses, sexually molested me. And I was so terrified to tell anybody. He used to tell me, it was very confusing because people don't I was afraid what people would think. I was afraid that people would think it was my fault. I would tell him no all of the time, and he didn't listen. We never had sex. He just touched me against my will, guilted me, scared me, caused a lot of anxiety for years. Played a lot of mind games. Knew how mean that everybody else was to me, and I was so desperate for a family member to accept me and love me, and he took advantage of that. He used to tell me all the time that he loved me, and he was the only cousin who really loved me, and it was okay, and it was our secret, and I couldn't tell anybody because they wouldn't understand, and that he was helping me. A lot of stuff. I still block a lot of it out. So I would go to work, and it was bad. Family functions were embarrassing. And my cousins continued to be pretty cruel. Lied about several family things. My mom actually said on speakerphone in front of all of my coworkers and my family. My grandfather died, which was my aunt and my mom's birth father. I didn't know that. I heard my cousin talking to one of the other coworkers, who was one of my good friends, saying how his grandfather had just died. And when I confronted him about it, he said his name, and it wasn't the grandfather that I knew. So he quickly realized that he had accidentally told me something I wasn't supposed to know. Come to find out, I was the only family member who didn't know. And called his mom, my aunt, and told her that he had let it slip, and that I knew, and I was mad. And my mom called the restaurant, and her only thing she said to me was, well, you're not blood, so you didn't need to know. He wasn't your grandfather. The grandfather that you knew was your grandfather, and that's all you need to know. I asked if I was the only one who didn't know, and I was. They hid a lot of secrets about my birth family, told me they didn't know anything. They did. They had an address, they had pictures, they had names, they had medical history. When I was 16, when I was 15, I dated my first love, and he ended up lying to me about everything. He was doing drugs, he was having sex, he was smoking, doing the whole 9 yards, and at 15, I was not, and he knew that I would not be okay with that. At the time, I was raised in the church, and that was just not how we grew up. So instead of telling me, which I was completely head over heels, thought I was going to marry the dude, his family was best friends with my family. We went over there every weekend. He then, my freshman year of high school, told everybody that I was a slut, that I cheated on him and slept with another guy, and he dumped me. I had no friends except for his friends, so that was how I started high school, and pretty much ruined my reputation. I was bullied pretty bad by any and everyone who knew him, which was most people, because he was pretty popular. I was still a virgin, hadn't even slept with him. And then this guy came into my life through a mutual good friend that had been my best friend since elementary school and middle school, but we got split up, went to different schools. I ended up reconnecting with her in high school, and I thought, okay, hey, she's not friends with his friends, this'll work. So she introduced me to her crowd of friends, which were not the best crowd of friends. Took a lot of advantage, I was again really desperate for love, for affection, for acceptance. I ended up making a deal with this guy, my second love. He was on heroin. He was in a band. He was in a rock band. He had a whole other life that his family didn't know about. So I was a good girl, good church girl, looked like a good girl to his family. So the deal was, if I walked with him every day to his car, pretended to be his girlfriend, he could basically lie, say he was with me, had a cover, and he would protect me from the other guy, the one that was bullying me with all of his friends. So it started out as a deal to protect me. He was the only one who would stick up to him, and stuck up to him and told him, you know, this is not cool, leave this girl alone, what the hell's your problem, and threatened to kick his ass, and they backed off. So we had that arrangement for a while, and then eventually it turned into more. And then the further the relationship went on, the further I thought that I could trust him, started to love him, didn't fully realize what all was going on. Thought he would change for me. Always think you can save him, but I couldn't. You can't save somebody that doesn't want to be saved. And we ended up being in a relationship for 8 years. He was an abusive alcoholic. Stopped the heroin after a while. When I was 16, I got pregnant and loved this guy. Thought I was, going to marry him, and thought he was going to change my life and save me and get me away from my family. And things weren't great at home. Me and my mom had a really rocky relationship. My dad used to have a pretty bad Italian temper, which he now says he didn't, which is fine. He's better now. But basically I ended up moving in with him pretty much full time at his house, and my stuff just stayed at my parents' house. Got really close with his family, basically helped raise his sister. Going back, when I was 16, I got pregnant, and we thought that, well, actually before that, I'm sorry, it's just so much has happened, and the timeline is just, it's a lot, and it's blurry, and I'm sorry, and I hope that it makes sense. But basically, and this is frustrating because I get lost. Okay. So he was abusive, and we went to school together, and a lot of our friends started seeing this and were concerned for my life, so they confronted him, and he proceeded to threaten to shoot the school, and anyone that got in his way to get to me. That it was nobody's business, and how dare they threaten him. Then claimed to never remember any of that. Obviously, the school district and parents got involved. He was expelled, and my parents then found out that he was abusive, and there was a whole mess of court thing anyway, and it ended up all getting dropped, but he never came back to school. And so he was going to change, he was going to be better. Young and dumb and stupid, I loved him, and I just couldn't let go. Ended up getting pregnant, and thought that, he was going to change, and always wanted a child so bad of my own, and always had a lot of respect for my birth mom, even never knowing her, for giving me up and giving me a better life. Because back then it was not thought of to have a pregnancy out of wedlock, or be a teenager and keep it or give it up for adoption. I was actually the only baby in Florida to be adopted that entire year, which is crazy. So my mom made a deal with me and with him that if I agreed to just go along with it and not let his family fight it, back then I was right on the border. The laws were different here where we live, and she convinced me, convinced the doctors that if I would just go along with it, he would give up his rights, I would have an abortion, and everybody would keep their mouths shut. She and her family could keep their Christianly appearance because they were very rich and into the church and had to keep appearances up. Then she would let us be together. And I cried through the whole thing. It was very painful, and still to this day, it wasn't until about a year ago, and I'm now 27, that I actually was able to realize that I never got to fully mourn losing my child against my will. At the time, I was right on the border of not having rights against my own body, because I was still a minor. And she brought me in there very hush-hush and had the doctor give me an abortion. At the time, it was an experimental pill, which had risks that were explained that gave us this whole list of medical history and did we have this, did we have that. She claimed she didn't know anything, which I know she did now. And took the risk that I may never be able to have another kid, and I worry about that every day. And had me take that pill anyway. Had me lose the child at home, on my own. Didn't really tell any of my friends. Couldn't really see my boyfriend. And so a lot of that was attachment to him too, that he was my first and that we lost a kid together, and that someday he would make it right, I would make it right, and we would try again. Well, my mom, needless to say, didn't hold up her end of the bargain and didn't let us see each other. I resented her for that for a long time. Years later, down the road, like I said, moved in with him. He was great when he was great, but when he was drunk, he was mean, and he was abusive, and mentally, physically, whole 9 yards. In the time that he was not at school, I met my current husband now. We were best friends back then. He wanted to save me, showed me kind of what love really was, but at the time, he obviously didn't know that I was being molested by my cousin, and that I had all this at home, and that I was terrified to go home, and I just couldn't let my current boyfriend go, even if he was bad. I just couldn't. We started out as best friends, and then he wanted more, and I kept telling him no, and he pursued me, not in a mean or forceful way, just trying to help me and trying to get me to see what real love really was, but it was a lot on him, and I didn't leave Adam. I went back and forth, and I really hurt him for that. I was his first love, and he lost his virginity to me. After that, he got to a point where he couldn't take it anymore. So senior year, after this went on for 2 years, the beginning of senior year, went on for all of junior year and the summer, and then senior year he moved to start a different life and get away from me because he couldn't take it. Not that I blame him, but that was hard. Had a lot of abandonment issues because the person that I had finally started to believe did love me and would always be there just left. And then we stayed in contact on and off for years. I stayed with the other guy, obviously. And then had a huge falling out with my family when it came out that my cousin was molesting another girl that I worked with, which was the same age, except she was in love with him, and they were having sex, and turns out she was not the only one. And when she told me, I just broke down. I remember going to work that day, and he loaded up my car with all the meat because I was going to take it to the other restaurant. And in the back of my car, he put a mold of his penis and texted me and told me to practice with it, that he was ready for me. And just so happened when I got to the other store, which is where the other girl was working, and it was just me and her, I completely broke down, and I don't know what made me snap. I just snapped, and I showed it to her, and she started crying and telling me and showing me text messages and emails and pictures, and obviously she believed me because she had been having sex with him, and it was a mold he had made of himself. He was the leader of a church, still is, to a different church now, but my family accused me, left me in the dark, and got a phone call the very next day. She went to church with her current husband and confronted my cousin and the preacher about everything. He admitted to it and took off, left town. I didn't know this. I got a phone call that next morning from my uncle, calling me a bitch and a whore and asking me where he was and saying that he knew I was sleeping with him, and he knew I knew where he was without ever even hearing my side of the story. It wasn't until a few weeks later, after I had been sitting down with the preacher, and my parents kicked me out for a while. They didn't believe me. My whole family took his side, wanted to cover it up, actually sent him to the same-sex rehab that Tiger Woods went to. My boyfriend's family at the time really tried to help me. They were good people, and when it came out, they did everything they could. We even went to the news several times. They wouldn't run the story because my uncle is a very powerful man and knows a little bit of everybody everywhere. And I at this time am a 21-year-old kid who's just lost her only job, now has no job reference, can't get unemployment because he lied and to the Social Security office. Okay, so I haven't used the flashlight for his phone. In fact, don't have light in here, and that video cut off, so that sucks. I hope I haven't I know I'm rambling, and I know it's a lot. It's years and years and years of abuse, and trust issues, and it's just, but I hope it makes sense, at least a little bit. If you go back and watch the first video, it's basically me telling the first part of my story. But I think where I left that, okay. So I gave my family an ultimatum, because I had had enough, and at this point, you know, I was out of job, I was out of place to live, I was staying with my abusive alcoholic boyfriend, and his family, which was wonderful. His family was wonderful. They did do a lot for me. I loved them dearly. They had a lot of issues of their own. They did take advantage a lot, because I would do anything for anybody that I loved. So skip forward years, and I found my birth family, because when I gave my family an ultimatum, I sat down and I said to my mom and dad that one of my coworkers finally came out and told me, they fired me, fired the other girl, kept my cousin working there. His wife, my cousin, did not divorce him, begged me not to press charges, basically just wanted to let him get away with it, begged me not to take him away from his kids, and I loved those kids, and I didn't have the money or resources or lawyer or anything, really. I did file a police report, and there is no statute of limitations, so, which now, this is like 5 years later, now she's divorced him, she's remarried, stupid mess, all that for nothing, and I got disowned from my family for being molested and traumatized. So I found out from a coworker after I was fired, which my uncle threatened all the coworkers that if they spoke to me, he would fire them, and he would make sure they couldn't get a job anywhere else. But she ended up hanging out with me a few times, and we got high because I had started using pot to deal with my issues, because it was literally the only thing I've found that helps, and it does help. It gets rid of my anxiety, it helps me sleep. I have night terrors, I have night anxiety, I have trouble sleeping at night, I'm exhausted the entire day, I'm exhausted most of the time, I'm angry at myself, I'm angry at all of these people. I'm angry that now I'm in a loving relationship with a wonderful man who's been nothing but good to me, and I have all these issues, and he has to deal with them, and he's having to clean up someone else's mess, and it's... Okay, so, I keep trying to post my story, and obviously, Facebook does not want me to tonight. So the first time I ran out of time, and it did help me to get a lot of it off my chest, so thank you guys for listening. Thank you for anybody who hears my story, and I hope that somebody can hear it and get something out of it. If anybody gets anything out of it, then it's worth it. I know that it helps me to get it out there, and for me a big step of that is, and has been, and is now, and was just taking the first step and saying, this is me, and I have PTSD, and I didn't ask for this, but it is the way it is, and I'm trying, which is all any of us can do. So thank you for watching, and if you want to hear the rest of my story, it is in part 1 and part 2 that I posted tonight, and I kept getting cut off with part 2, so I'm going to call it a night, and I will hopefully share more later, and I applaud all of you who did the PTSD challenge. I watched them. They were very helpful. It's good to know that I'm not alone. It's nice to know there's others that feel the same things I do. It sucks, and I hate that anyone would ever have to go through any of this. And keep fighting, and thank God for this group, and thank God for Jamie, that we have a place to share all of this with others who can relate and understand and hopefully help each other. So again, my name is Liz, and I have PTSD, anxiety, and depression.